Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Welcome into the GSMC Football Podcast right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Brice Lewis, and obviously, you know, we do here, we talk about everything football. Obviously, we have a very impactful show today. Obviously, a lot of things have happened, obviously, in the world, and obviously that has affected the world of sports, which also includes football. So clearly, we're going to talk about all that and more right here on the podcast. Obviously, we're going to get into all of the breakdown and everything that is going on around the world that has affected the NFL game. And obviously, you know, this, like I said, just obviously with all the Black Lives Matter movements and protests that are going on, clearly this is a very, very big deal for everybody involved. And obviously, this first segment, we're just going to discuss one of the biggest stories that has came out, and that's Drew Brees. Drew Brees is now probably one of the most hated men within the football world after being the most beloved man for almost the last 18, 17 years. Drew Brees made a comment after being asked about how would he be a leader if players started to kneel again this season. And basically, he said that even though they never asked this particular question or was looking for that particular answer, he basically said, I will never support anyone who who disrespects the flag. And, you know, obviously, if there's one thing about Drew Brees that a lot of people know is that he's very open about his grandfathers who were in the who served in, I think, in World War II, I believe. And I think everybody, after hearing that, was outraged. They were angry. They were upset. They felt betrayed because a man like Drew Brees, who's been around black people his whole life, you know, Drew's a smart man. He's aware of the problems in this country. Where he's aware of everything that's going on. And for him to make those comments, it just made him come off like he refuses to understand. There is an ignorance there. And a lot of NFL players called him out for it. A lot of NFL players called him out on what he said. Because a lot of people are very upset about what he has said. So obviously this is pretty big. Now obviously at first Michael Thomas and Demario Davis spoke out, obviously, since they're teammates with Drew Brees, and they weren't happy about it. But after the apology that Drew Brees released, they accepted their apology. They said, okay, we can move on. Obviously, Malcolm Jenkins made a video about what he said about Drew Brees, and it seems like he won't be moving on. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in that locker room when Drew Brees comes back. Because a lot of people have been ticked off. A lot of people have been disappointed. A lot of people were caught off guard by Drew Brees saying that. And obviously that probably will cause a lot of people to not know if they want to even support Drew Brees anymore. Like I said, there's three people I know who are Saints fans that are just like, I support the Saints, but I don't support Drew Brees now. Drew Brees was my boy, but he's not my boy no more. So clearly it's affected a lot of people. I'll read you some tweets that some NFL players have said about this situation. Obviously, I'll bleep out or won't say the bad language, but everything else I'll say. Martellus Bennett said this: "You get in front of millions on your platform and give an ignorant statement, effing up the message dudes have lost their jobs fighting for. You and your friends need to take your knees off the necks of black teammates and stand for something." Obviously, very, 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 strong statements, very strong tweets coming from this. Ed Reed made a comment saying that after Drew Brees' comments, he is a straight up sucker. And obviously, that was another person who obviously had something to say about it. Obviously, Cam Jordan, another teammate of Drew Brees, just said, "Be a better ally." Obviously, reaching out saying, "Hey, Drew, you're my teammate and everything, but you got to be better than this. This is not gonna cut it at all." Because it's not. It's not. CJ McCollum said, "We need more Aaron Rodgers and less Drew Breeses." Obviously, LeBron James was the biggest person who spoke out about what Drew said and said, "Wow, man, it is still surprising at this point. Sure, isn't it? You literally still don't understand why Cap was kneeling on one knee. Has absolutely nothing to do with the disrespect of the flag and our soldiers, men and women who keep our land free. My father-in-law was one of those men who fought for this country as well. I asked him a question about it and thank him all the time for his commitment. He never found Cap's peaceful protest offensive because he and I both know what's right, what right is right and what's wrong is wrong. God bless you." I mean, like I said, it was just an outpouring of comments, an outpouring of things. It's just, and you can tell also. Like I said, it's just athletes. It's not just football players. It's athletes who are all, coming for Drew Brees, coming at Drew Brees, disappointed with Drew Brees because of the comments that he made. Because a lot of people were very disappointed about what has happened. Tobias Harris from the NBA said, "After going on past and present, if this is Drew Brees' mindset, please don't send out an apology tomorrow. Spare your PR team the time." Obviously, as you know, Drew Brees did send out, a comment about what happened, apologizing for what he did, apologizing for what he said. He apologized for his insensitive comments and about protests and respect for the flag, vows to be an ally for the black community. Obviously, a lot of NFL players have not accepted that, but some will. Obviously, Richard Sherman said Drew Brees is beyond loss with comments about kneeling. Obviously, the McCourty twins said, "This is a disgrace to speak about your grandfathers if there weren't black men fighting next to them. Those men later returned to the country that hated them. Don't avoid the issue and try to make it about the flag or the military. Fight for, like your grandfathers, for what's right." And obviously, like I said, you can tell by the outpouring of tweets. Josh Jacobs says, "This ain't it." Obviously, Jamal Adams said, "Damn it, Drew." I mean, literally, you just see it all across. With all the statements, players are very turned off and disappointed in Drew Brees because of who Drew Brees is, because of who Drew Brees was supposed to be, how people view Drew Brees, and then seeing these types of comments obviously has turned a lot of people off, made a lot of people disappointed, and just a lot of people are now not Drew Brees fans. I mean, New Orleans was really chanting yesterday, basically screw Drew Brees during protests, and so you can tell clearly it's not good. It's not good at all, and Drew Brees is facing the repercussions of it now, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens when Drew Brees walks into that locker room in New Orleans when training camp comes around and how the teammates respond to him, and etc. But coming up next, another story, Jake Fromm. Racist text messages have been exposed. We'll discuss that. And we'll also talk about Odell Beckham, as he's been known as a model guy this offseason, and more right here on the podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment we talked about the Drew Brees dilemma. The entire NFL world was going in on Drew Brees, coming after Drew Brees, disgusted with Drew Brees, upset with Drew Brees. A guy who was looked at so positively by so many people in this league, looked at as one of the best leaders. Someone that, you know, was very smart, very intelligent, very active in communities, understanding the struggle, and the comments that he ended up making, turning off so many people, making people wonder what's really going on here. Is this truly how he believes? Is this truly what he thinks is going on around the league, and etc. All that, just all that disappointment, all that stuff, you know, going on, and obviously that's very, very big, you know, that's happening. But now we got another story also. Jake Fromm, quarterback from the former Georgia Bulldogs starting quarterback, had some text come out basically saying that only elite whites should have guns. Obviously, this created another uproar, because obviously this is big. And now they're saying that Jake Fromm's job could be at risk, because now you kind of have a lot of negative publicity around him because of these text messages and these comments. So the Bills may end up cutting him at the end of training camp because of this. You know, obviously the Bills have already released a statement, but Jake Fromm also released a public apology as well. Jake Fromm said, and I quote, "I am extremely sorry that I chose to use those words, elite white people, in a text message conversation. Although I never meant to imply that I am an elite white person, as stated later in the conversation, there's no excuse for that word choice and sentiment. While it was poor, my heart is not. Now more than ever is the time to support togetherness, and I stand against racism 100%. I promise to commit myself to being a part of the solution in this country. I addressed my teammates and coaches in a team meeting today, and I hope that they see this incident is not representative of the person I am. Again, I am truly sorry for the words and actions, and humbly ask for forgiveness." And that's what Jake Fromm said. Now, Buffalo came out and said, after those comments, or after that apology was released, they said, "Earlier today, we became aware of the comments made in the text message conversation involving Jake Fromm in 2019. As the statement continues to read, he was wrong, and he admitted to us. We don't condone what he said. Jake was honest and forthcoming about the text exchange. He asked an opportunity to address and apologize to his teammates and coaches today in the team meeting, which he did. We will continue to work with Jake on the responsibilities of being a Buffalo Bill on and off the field." So, clearly, big thing, big moves, big thing. Obviously, a lot of people upset, a lot of people angry. It just adds fuel to the fire of what's been going on in the NFL and just in the world in general. These types of comments happening. You know, Jake Fromm making a comment that was considered very inappropriate. So, and you know, it's just very, very just disappointing. Sean McDermott also released a statement about what happened with Jake Fromm, and I quote, he said this: "I'm disappointed. As a coach in the NFL, I know this hits very close to home. hits directly at home for a lot of guys on our football team. When we talk about doing things the right way, I feel strongly about as a country right now. Right now, we need to unify. I know emotions are very high right now, and that's to be expected. But as I share it with our players, let's channel that energy into doing good for our communities. So, obviously, you know, like I said, a lot of people say anything. Obviously, trending on Twitter, people obviously roasting, making memes. You know how this goes. But as you can tell, it's very, you know, crazy. You know, obviously Jamal Adams already said Jake Fromm and Brice can save those apologies. He doesn't want to hear it. And just, you know, you can tell, obviously, it's just very, very, you know, crazy and a difficult time for a lot of people in the league. So that's going to be very just intriguing to see what happens moving forward with Jake Fromm. Now, Jake Fromm obviously isn't like a starting quarterback or anything, so it's not like it's like he's having to go into a locker room as the guy, but this could increase his chances to maybe potentially get cut from the Buffalo Bills this offseason if things don't work out. You know, because obviously that's not really what you want from your top guy at all. You want them to always be, or a guy who you bring onto your team. You want all guys 1 through 53 to have great character. You don't want to have to address issues about a person's character. And I think that's the biggest thing right now that is more bothersome about a lot of these stories and a lot of things that have been happening is the character of these men have been expressed, seen, and just looked down upon because you're just looking at, like, how can you say stuff like this? Why would you say stuff like this? And et cetera, et cetera. And obviously that's what's creating the issues that we have in the country today. So obviously we hope to educate and improve upon these things. But going on to the other story I said, more of a positive story. They said Odell Beckham Jr. for Cleveland has been a very positive model and citizen this offseason. On a conference call with reporters, his new offensive coordinator, Alex Van Pelt, says he's been very impressed with what he's seen from Odell Beckham this offseason. In the conference call, he said he's been a model guy and is all in with the team as they've navigated through a virtual offseason. His quote says, it's been great. I've known of Odell, obviously. Ben McAdoo coached Odell in New York, and everything that Ben talked to me about, I've seen. He's a worker. He loves football. He's smart. He's just been a model guy this offseason. I can't wait to get him in the building, get him on the field. He's been outstanding. Obviously, if you remember, Odell Beckham's first year was not that great. His first year, even though he did get over 1,000 yards, was like the borderline 1,000 yards. And obviously the Browns were expected to compete for the AFC North title, but stumbled to a 6-10 record and fired head coach Freddie Kitchens after one season. There was some speculation that Odell might be on the move, but it looks like they're not going to trade him, and they'll probably end up keeping him around. So obviously that's going to be a big thing right there. Because Odell is a playmaking wide receiver, so obviously you don't want to give away that kind of talent purposely unless you have to for those reasons. You know, and obviously Cleveland's obviously hoping for a much better season just in general, not just from Odell, but just in general after what happened, because obviously they don't want to go through another season of struggle like they've gone through. So obviously they're hoping for a more successful offseason that's coming up, and hopefully looking forward to what's going to potentially pop up in the future with them, and just seeing the opportunities that are about to be created from this opportunity right now. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Odell Beckham in Cleveland, and to see if there really is progress made with everybody involved on the team, and if they can get a better team and group effort out there on the field so everybody can be at the best at the end of the day, so that way they can then grow and be even greater. So obviously that's going to be something we will definitely pay attention to moving forward. But as of our next segment, now we're going to get into some more comments that were made by Denver's head coach, Vic Fangio. And his comments got him under fire this past week for something he said, obviously relating to what's been going on. So obviously we're going to break that down. We're going to talk about it here and more right here on the GSMC podcast. You definitely want to stay tuned. Don't miss out. Don't not listen, you know.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment we discussed the racist text messages, or the controversial text messages Jake Fromm that was released. Jake Fromm apologized. Buffalo made a comment on it. Head coach Sean McDermott made a comment on it. Obviously, in this time of just so much going on in the country, obviously this is pretty much what's going on right now, and even in the sports world, it's something you can't really get away from. So obviously that's big, and that's what's going on right now. As obviously that's not obviously what you would want for a new guy, especially Jake Fromm, trying to make the team. These comments are not going to help your chances. We also talked about Odell Beckham being a model citizen this offseason, so according to Alex Van Pelt, the new Cleveland Browns offensive coordinator, saying that Odell has been great and he cannot wait to get Odell on the field and actually playing and being able to see what he really can do. But now we're going to get into some more controversial comments again by Broncos head coach Vic Fangio. Vic Fangio obviously was asked during the press conference, and he gave his opinion about what he thought on everything and what he felt like the NFL was compared to the world. So obviously that's going to be very interesting moving forward, and then we're going to talk about right now. So obviously Vic Fangio has walked back his comments since then, obviously apologizing for it, but we're going to tell you what he said. In a Tuesday conference call with reporters, Fangio acknowledged that larger work needed to address social injustice, but downplayed to which extent it impacts the NFL. And I quote for what he said during this conference call. He said, and I quote, "I think our problems in the NFL along those lines are minimal. We're a league of mediocrity. You earn what you get. You get what you earn. I don't see racism at all in the NFL. I don't see discrimination in the NFL. We all live together, joined as one for one common goal, and we all intermingle and mix tremendously. If society reflected an NFL team, we'd all be great." So obviously, when this happened, a lot of players were up in arms as well, because a lot of players said, "You're telling me there's no racism in the NFL? Are you serious? Are you blind? Are you just oblivious to it?" A lot of players obviously spoke out and said, "How could you just miss something like that? How could you not see something like that? There's clearly still racism within the league itself." Literally, Colin Kaepernick kneeled for stuff like this, and the league blackballed him. So you coming here and publicly saying that the NFL does not deal with racism was a slap in the face to a lot of players, because they felt like you don't understand. Like, there is still racism that we face in this league. On Wednesday, obviously he backed his comments, and we're going to read his official statement that he released on what he said and how he apologized during this. And he said, and I quote, After reflecting on my comments yesterday and listening to the players this morning," because remember, a lot of teams are also meeting right now, so players are now able to kind of like talk to these guys. But I realized what I said regarding racism and discrimination in the NFL was wrong. While I have never experienced those terrible things firsthand during my 33 years in the NFL, I understand that many players, coaches, and staff have different perspectives. I should have been more clear, and I am sorry. I wanted to make the point yesterday that there is no color within the locker room I have been in or on where the player on the playing fields I have coached on. Unfortunately, we don't live or work only within those confines. Outside of those lines, both in the NFL and society, there is a lot of work to be done in the areas of diversity and providing opportunities across the board for minorities. As head coach, I look forward to listening to the players both individually and collectively to support them and work hand in hand to create meaningful change. So obviously, that was him apologizing, going back on his comments, trying to obviously get some things right. Obviously, it's a little different when it's the quarterback, because the quarterback is the guy who's a player in that locker room who you trust. The head coach is just the guy who coaches the team. But you still want to have a good relationship with him, but that could obviously hurt some situations right there. Obviously, you just got to remember something as well with people saying there's no racism. The NFL just amended the Rooney Rule in May to give minority candidates more of a chance because the minority candidates were getting hired. And I think that's why a lot of people feel like, how can you sit here and say that's not there? When literally they had to amend a rule to help minorities get a chance. And I think that's why some people have an issue with it. Obviously, Terrell Owens called out the head coach and said, don't see racism at all in the NFL. I don't see discrimination in the NFL. He needs to be drug tested. What does he think that was against Colin Kaepernick? Obviously, that was what T.O. said. You know, that's what T.O. had to go out of his way and say, because it's just like, really? How can you say that? How could you just be so oblivious to it? How could you not realize that that's going on in the country? And honestly, the biggest thing I think a lot of players obviously want is just transparency. The transparency to realize what's going on and to go about trying to fix the issue. Because obviously that's a big deal moving forward. You know, so it'll be interesting to see how that all turns out at the end of the day. Like I said, we'll have to see how the Broncos team handles it. So we're going to have to see how that goes. And just to get to another story here in the segment, the NFL is also saying that the teams must hold training camps at their team facilities during the pandemic. Obviously, before, NFL teams would usually maybe go to a different location, a different city, a different state even potentially, and hold their training camp there. And then obviously practices where they would go for their actual team facilities and practices and stuff. But the NFL is saying this year you can't do that. You have to stay at your facility. You have to remain in your facility. And you have to, you know, basically just do what you got to do there. So obviously, you know, this is the league mandate. So obviously, wherever the team facility is, that's where your team is going to be practicing, having camp. Obviously, this is just to help lower the potential of somebody getting COVID-19. Obviously, even amongst all the protests and stuff happening in the country, COVID is still out there. COVID still exists. It hasn't gone away. So obviously, the league's trying to still make sure that that doesn't, you know, come in, swoop in and affect the NFL season and change what happens. Because obviously that's a big deal, you know, moving on forward and stuff like that. So just, you know, like I said, this is probably a good move by the league just to make sure that they have this like covered so they're not having to deal with these issues and that they're able to create an atmosphere and a platform to protect the players, because obviously the protection and safety of the players should be the most important thing for the league at this moment. More than anything else that they have going on right now is just making sure that the players are able to get home safe, stay healthy, so that way you could have a successful NFL season coming up and not have to worry about the potential of, oh, who's going to get COVID, who could be sick, could it spread, et cetera, et cetera. But coming up next, we're going to go into a Bleacher Report list of starting QBs most likely to lose their jobs during this upcoming season. So if you want to hear about that, my opinion on it, and all that and more, stay right here, tune in to the podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment we discussed basically what Vic Fangio said in the response and the backlash to his comments that he made also about social injustice, saying that there is no racism within the NFL, and a lot of players coming out saying, what do you mean there is racism in the NFL? How could you be blind to it? So obviously that created an uproar. Obviously everybody was very upset about those comments. And I've said multiple times it'll be interesting to see what happens when, you know, they get into the locker room and seeing how that all works out and how they respond to what's going on. But also, we also discussed how the NFL has said there will be the training camps that you have this season will all be at home at your practice facility. No teams can travel for training camp, so obviously that's going to be the big thing there when that gets to it. So, now we're going to get into the Bleacher Report list about they have 7 quarterbacks that they think will lose their job this year during the season, and we're going to talk about and break down each one right here on the podcast, my thoughts and opinion on each one in the situation. At number 7 on this list, Dwayne Haskins. Obviously, Dwayne Haskins, listen, he didn't really get the fairest of shakes as a rookie, as they were keeping him from the starting job for journeyman Case Keenum. And they also did fire Jay Gruden early in the season as well. Now, Haskins eventually played at the end of last year. He showed some promise, but, you know, he definitely struggled a lot. And he threw a lot of picks early, and it wasn't good. But like I said, the last 2 games, he showed some progression. He showed some progress, played a little better. And that's all you really look for from young quarterbacks is just improvement. But you never know. Sometimes you don't always get the fairest of shakes when it comes to, you know, the league. Now, this offseason, Washington hired Ron Rivera as a head coach. Obviously, they changed the front office. And Ron Rivera made a move for a quarterback that he was starting for him last year in Kyle Allen. Obviously, Kyle Allen's only 24. And even though he didn't have the greatest season, throwing 17 touchdowns and 16 picks, he showed he was competent. Obviously, Haskins is the projected guy going into this year as a starter. But, obviously, since the organization has shifted, these are not the same people who drafted him. You know, always in these situations, as Baker's going through it as well, when you have a new regime in there, you're having to prove yourself to them. They we're sold on you, we're going to go draft you because we think you can be it. It's, you don't know what they thought about you if they were in the position to draft you and what they have drafted you. A lot of the time, it's just a matter of, hey, if you really think you belong here, then show us you belong here through your play. If you don't play well, then we will get rid of you. Simple as that. Number 6 on their list is Philip Rivers. Obviously, Philip Rivers is a very interesting person they put on this list because obviously Philip Rivers is getting paid a lot of money, and they expect him to come in and be one of the reasons why that they potentially get to the playoffs because the Colts are in a win now mode. Now, obviously, like I said, he was probably their biggest addition in free agency this year. And listen, on paper, this looks like a good deal. This looks like a good signing. This looks like a good, okay, we just got him in here. This looks really good. We're feeling pretty good. We have a lot of potential here. But in real life, remember, not Drew Brees. Oh, brother. Not Drew Brees. Listen, we're done talking about Drew right now. But Philip is now 39 years of age and took a noticeable step back last season. Now, yes, he did get 4,600 yards to the air, but only got 23 touchdowns and 20 interceptions while going 5-11, taking the Los Angeles Chargers from 12 to 5 wins. Now, obviously, one of the big things why people think the Rivers could be successful in Indianapolis is because obviously the Colts have one of the best, if not the best, offensive lines in all of football, and obviously the Chargers is probably average at best. So maybe that will help Phillip Rivers maybe redeem that old form he had. But listen, at the end of the day, Phillip Rivers is a risk. There's a chance being taken here. We don't know if they're going to be able to be what they expect. And they're going to hope for the best. They're going to hope for the best. So we're going to have to see how it turns out and how it looks on paper, but I can definitely understand why there is some skepticism if he could be the guy moving forward. Number 5 on this list, quarterback for the New England Patriots, Jarrett Stidham. Obviously, Stidham's in this spot because he's replacing Tom Brady. And obviously, a lot of people have a lot of questions about Jarrett Stidham. They don't know if Jarrett Stidham's even good. We have no idea. And it seems like Bill Belichick is willing to go into the season with him being the guy. And also, you got to think about it, too. New England had a chance to go after a bigger name, a more experienced player, any of those guys. And they refused to. So that has to show a confidence in Jarrett Stidham since they did that. But at the end of the day, there is a worrisome, listen, if things will work out and he gets benched or he doesn't play well, then clearly this is going to make people then believe, okay, yeah, clearly this man isn't the guy. Clearly this guy isn't what a lot of people are already expecting not to be the right guy for the job. And obviously that might make people question New England because they're just like, well, why would you go with a guy that you knew wasn't ready or you knew wasn't able to ahead of time? So obviously New England's taking a chance with this. But obviously the backup is Brian Hoyer, who has experience in this league, has played in this league. So he has plenty of time and ability to kind of know what's going on, what's happening around here. If Stidham, shows out, then clearly, he'll get the job and he'll show everybody, and then Bill Belichick's gonna look a genius. But if he struggles and he doesn't play well, obviously everybody's gonna be like, well, this was to be expected. Why didn't you try a little harder or go out of your way more to find a guy who you had maybe more confidence in to be your starting quarterback? So there's going to be a lot of pressure on Jarrett Stidham this year to come out and be the guy. Because if he's not, at best you look at this as maybe a year and done type of situation for the most part. If it doesn't actually end up working out for him and New England this season, if Brian Hoyer has to come in, unless it's for injury, if it's just for performance, then that probably will end Jarrett Stidham's reign and stint as quarterback of the New England Patriots after this year is over. But we're going to continue on with this list, and we're going to talk about the last remaining quarterbacks on this list in the next segment. So if you want to figure out the last 4 people on this list who they think is going to get replaced this year at some point by Bleacher Report, stay tuned right here to the GSMC Football Podcast. Yes, sir.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we were discussing the whole not Nick Foles. That's what we're about to talk about, actually. First, when we restart this list, we were talking about the 7 quarterbacks that Bleacher Report thinks will be replaced during this year. We really only talked about 3, but now we're going to talk about the last 4 right here during this segment, because obviously this is a very interesting list, and obviously, all these guys so far, there's legitimate cases that you can maybe make why they would end up being replaced and why there would be a change. So obviously that's going to be something, if you're interested, like I said, stay tuned. But the next guy on the list is Nick Foles. Obviously, I've said this on the podcast with Ethan, that I feel like Chicago's situation is going to be flamboyant on their season. How their season goes will determine if Nick Foles is the quarterback all 16. If Nick Foles starts and they go 10-6, then yeah, I would think for the most part Nick Foles got them to 10-6. He deserved to be the starting quarterback. But if the Chicago Bulls have a losing season or go through losing stretches, there's a very strong possibility you're going to see Mitchell Trubisky. Obviously, the Bears traded for Nick Foles, and they reunited him with his quarterback coach, John DeFilippo, in a move that clearly signals he'll get every chance to start over Mitchell Trubisky in 2020. And while, listen, even though both guys are going to have a chance to play in the starters, it looks like Matt Nagy's going to try to look for Foles. Listen, Foles is a guy who's also been a journeyman quarterback. He's never, outside of the stint he had with the Eagles, where he won them a Super Bowl and has played well within the Eagles system, there's still a lot of question and there's still a lot of doubt. How good truly is Nick Foles? Is he really that good? That is a big question that a lot of people are wondering. Is he someone worth giving a starting job to and then get us to the playoffs? Obviously, the Bears have one of the best defenses in the league. They just need the offense to be comparable and the quarterback to play well. And the Bears could obviously be a team that has a chance to make something happen moving forward. But we don't know. We really don't know. And like I said, they're going to put some hope into Nick. But obviously, Nick, I agree, has a chance to be replaced. Because, like I said, you don't know what you're getting with Nick. You don't. You really don't know. And so you're just hoping for the best, and we'll see how it ends up. Now, number 3 is probably one of the most interesting people on this list to me. Gardner Minshew. Obviously, the Jaguars moved on from Nick Foles after paying him all that money last year. And they drafted Gardner Minshew really probably to be a project quarterback, just a guy that maybe could be a backup for him. And ended up playing well when he was pushed into the situation to start. Now, Gardner Minshew isn't in the best situation right now either. He's playing on a very roster depleted team. Remember, he was never expected to be that good to begin with, and maybe if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars, you may have seen some of his limitations. As a rookie, he completed 60% of his passes, 21 scores and 6 interceptions while going 6-6. So that's not terrible. That's not terrible. Obviously, you want it to be better, but it's not terrible, especially the touchdown to interception ratio. That's not bad. But as promising as Minshew looked at times last year, his surroundings didn't help him a lot. Obviously, they signed Mike Glennon, who was out of the league, I believe, last year. But he has familiarity with Doug Marrone's offense. And they also have Joshua Dobbs. Now, obviously, this is more assuming and guessing on the fact that Jacksonville is going to be really bad. So that could lead to Gardner Minshew not playing well. And so then that would cause Gardner Minshew to be replaced. So obviously, if that happens, then you might see Mike Glennon and you might see Joshua Dobbs. Obviously, you know, I'm a Gardner Minshew fan. I hope he does well in the position with Jacksonville playing. I think he has. I think just his character, his persona is really cool, and I think that he's not. If anything, he should have showed people last year he can at least be a top level backup in this league. A guy who definitely can come into a game and win you games, and that should be able to keep him in the league for 10 to 12 years, no matter how long he wants to play. I think that at least should have been shown out of everything that has happened. Next up, Tyrod Taylor. Now, obviously, this one's a more obvious one because you would think at some point Justin Herbert will play for the Los Angeles Chargers this year. But they're thinking and looking at, obviously, Anthony Lynn's a fan of Tyrod, and he's looking at Tyrod as a guy who they can have play early and not have to rush Justin Herbert out onto the field. And like I said, Tyrod Taylor has been a top backup and average decent starter in this league. And so he's definitely a guy who could be a great bridge quarterback for a team. I mean, listen, all signs have pointed to him getting this job. And Taylor turns 31 in August, but is a guy that like I said, I think he can hold down the fort for a little bit if they need him to. So we shouldn't be so quick to assume that he won't be able to make it on with the team. So, Tyrod is kind of in a very fluid situation. Obviously, I think as long as he plays well, he'll keep the job. But I think, obviously, if he has that game or a couple of games where he struggles or he has a terrible performance, clearly there is a very strong and high possibility that Justin Herbert will come in. And usually in these situations, you usually think when you have young rookie quarterbacks like this, sometimes the quarterbacks they have in front of them are kind of on not a lot of leash either, because of the fact that they know there's that pressure, eternal pressure to put him in the game. And obviously the number one player on this list is Ryan Fitzpatrick, because everybody knows Tua is projected to be Tua is projected to start at some point this year. We just don't know when. Now, people are saying that Fitzpatrick will probably be the starter going into the year for sure. That's an absolute. But we don't know how much longer after that first game he'll be starter. He could be replaced the next week. We don't have a clue. Obviously, we would think Tua is the best quarterback out on this roster, talent and potential and future-wise. And listen, Fitzpatrick still played well. Obviously, Fitzpatrick's probably one of the better backups, top line backups in the league. He was tied for fourth last year with 4 game-winning drives, which is one of the reasons why Miami went 5-4 down the stretch. And listen, if they play Fitzpatrick, he gives what looks like an improving roster a fighting chance. And he's one of the better veterans to help mentor Tua. Listen, Fitzpatrick said he's a fan of Tua, he supports Tua, and he hopes the best for Tua. But he also is coming to compete, and he's also coming to play. So, obviously, that's going to be a big thing, again, moving forward, as everybody kind of expects that to happen, and for him to get replaced. But coming up next, we're going to talk more NFL, all that right here and more on the podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we finished up the list that Bleacher Report had on the top quarterbacks that are most likely to lose their jobs this coming season. We discussed the last four. Obviously, listen, it happens every year. Someone's going to lose a job because of play or injury. And someone's going to come in and play well. And they're going to become a new potential star or a new face. And it may be somebody we don't expect. It may be somebody we do expect. It may be for an anticipated rookie. It may be for a rookie we didn't even know was even existing in the league, unless you were a fan of that team. It's just a matter of a lot of different things that happen in the NFL. The NFL is always forever changing. And there's never one definitive thing that happens within the league. So that obviously helps out a lot of different things in the league in general. But now we're going to get into some general news and notes to end the show. And to start off, now obviously I reported earlier that the NFL is making teams practice at their facilities. But the NFL has also said when it comes to training camp, teams cannot have joint practices. Obviously, joint practices have been very popular the last few years because of the fact that it gives you a chance to practice with other teams, let your team hit somebody else, get some good training in with other players, just to see how they match up against other players. Obviously, again, COVID-19 happening, you're not really wanting all the players to be out and about and being in contact with so many other people. Because the last thing you need is a player potentially having COVID. And then, since you have a joint practice, it spreads to the other team and the other team gets it. And it just goes downhill from there. Obviously, the worst thing that would happen for the NFL right now is if a breakout happened within the locker rooms. So obviously, again, keeping every team away from each other just in case, unless probably for the preseason games, is probably their priority, which is why they probably said no joint practice. Remember, even before they sent out this memo, there were teams considering doing joint practices. There was just no guarantee, or there was no certainty if that was actually going to happen. I think the Falcons were trying to see if they were going to have joint practices with a couple of teams they were going to play in the preseason. And obviously, like I said, with the NFL going ahead and saying no to joint practices, clearly that won't happen. So you really, outside of the games, you won't have a chance to really have any type of other competition against other teams because of obviously what's going on, which obviously makes a lot of sense. And it's something you can't argue with the league. It makes a lot of sense why they're doing this and why they think this is the best decision. Again, moving forward with the team, just to be safe, on the safer side. So obviously that was obviously a big deal there. But also, talking about COVID-19, switching to college football, 5 Alabama players have tested positive for COVID-19. Obviously that's big news. A lot of college kids are coming back to campus, and obviously all of them are getting tested. So obviously this is pretty big that Alabama's players have gotten it, and so that's kind of a big deal. It's kind of a crazy deal as well. And we'll have to see. We don't know if these are major players or just players in general. According to Simone Ellie of CBS 42 in Birmingham, confirmed the Bama Insider report, adding the players showed no symptoms when they received their positive test on Thursday after being tested on Tuesday and practicing together on Wednesday. A source told Ellie that the players should be in quarantine now in practice, and the practice was a gathering players chose to plan on their own as team activities and voluntary workouts don't begin until next week. The SEC was the first conference to allow and voted to allow student athletes back on campus for voluntary workouts beginning June 8th, which is obviously, again, when the workouts organizedly start next week. Workouts will be under strict supervision and must follow health and safety guidelines established by the universities. And now let's not also forget the SEC also recommended health and safety measures, including testing of symptomatic players and a 3-stage screening process, with screening before student athletes arrive on campus within 72 hours of entering athletic facilities on a daily basis upon resumption of athletic activities. So obviously, old Saint Nick probably isn't happy about this. His players getting, COVID. So that's kind of crazy. What's happened there with them. Obviously, I want to also read to you guys what the SEC has said about what's been going on with the social injustice. And this is a quote from the head of the SEC, Greg Sadansky. And he said, throughout the last few days, we have used our social platforms to share voices from across our conference. Each voice expressed sorrow, sadness, hurt, and anger. And each voice reminded us of the many ways we fall short in our quest for racial equality, respect, and justice. By listening, asking, and seeking, we will begin to make a difference. But we must first reach beyond our comfortable places and engage the uncomfortable reality. Today we build on these voices and take a vital next step in our shared journey by convening our SEC student leadership councils in these critical discussions. Today's youth are our leaders and change agents of tomorrow. Through this dialogue, we expect to gain a greater understanding of their current reality and visions for more just and an equitable society. Their input, along with guidance of campus leaders, will help us determine what actions we as a conference will take next to influence real and positive change. The change we lead must be real and must realize that we are all created equal, which in our case must echo across our stadiums, arenas, our campuses, our communities, our states, our nation. Together, it just means more. And I just want to get into this quick little dialogue, what's going on right now. Obviously with the state of college football. We still, obviously, since they're coming back, and they're going to obviously try to have the season. We still don't know how they're going to go about fans and how they're going to schedule, okay, who's allowed, who's not allowed, et cetera, but they're going to still have to try to have the season. College football has a lot on the line, obviously. College football funds a lot of things at these universities. And, obviously, these conferences could lose billions of dollars if they don't have a season. They probably will still, obviously, they're going to still lose a lot. There's a lot of great things happen. And it's just, listen, we just got to make sure we keep the safety of the college kids in our thoughts. We don't want to put them into a dangerous situation, even though we love the sport of football. The future of college football will be interesting. We'll see how it impacts, because college is not just affecting the game; it's affecting the schools, it's affecting the conferences. The type of impact this could have on the conference may be something that can't be fixed within a year. It may take decades to fix, just because of what's happened this year. So we'll have to see how everything kind of turns out and works out at the end of the day, and how everything is kind of put together when it's all said and done. But thank you for tuning into the GSMC Football Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to listen to our other amazing podcasts on GSMC Podcast Network. Don't forget to leave a review, subscribe, any of that. Really, we appreciate it. And again, everybody just stay safe out there. We're going to get through it. We're going to get through everything that's going on right now. So I hope everybody is able to have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.